Well, Shabbat Shalom. I cannot tell you in the history of this ministry have I had this type of a technical difficulty before. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about biases today. And so I'm going to say that there's a bit of a confirmation bias in me when ghosts in the machine just interfere with the broadcast. And why? This particular message is one that has been on my heart for a couple of weeks, and I feel like I kind of needed to build up to, but then also I felt like maybe there was some information missing. Okay, so let's get into it. First and foremost, let me say something. From the beginning and the inception of my journey with God, it all kind of came to a head in 2000. Now, before 2000, although I can tell you since I've been a little kid, I've never been able to get God to shut up. In fact, I'm sure there's some professionals who would say that, I may have some sort of diagnosis. But for all intents and purposes, when we are dealing with information, we have to think in terms of three different areas. I'm going to talk to you today about something called the trivea. Okay. So let's get into that. We'll just go ahead and jump straight to the board real quick so I can do some illustrations for you. Let's see. I think I want some different colors today. Let's go that for that. Let's do blue and let's do dark blue. Okay. We'll see how this goes. But okay, so the first thing you need to know is that when we are dealing with trivam, we are dealing with three, a series of three. Okay. So let's see. We'll just go ahead and kind of get this stuff labeled. So the way I want you to think about this is that this is going to be kind of like wisdom. Okay. And this is going to be kind of like understanding. And this is going to be knowledge. Okay. So, if we were to bring some verse into this, we would say the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. So let's go to Proverbs chapter 3. And I'll go ahead and cue it up first before I share it with you guys. HDMI cable unplugged. Let's see, here we go. Proverbs chapter 3, and it's Psalms. I hit the wrong button here. Okay, here. Chapter 3, and what I specifically want to look at is basically this part right here in chapter 3. It says, Yahweh by wisdom founded the earth, by understanding he established the heavens, and by his knowledge the depths were broken up, and clouds dropped down the dew. Okay. Let's see if there is one other thing I want to see here. Secret counsel. Yeah, so okay. For the perverse person, is an abomination to Yahweh, but his secret counsel is with the upright. Let's talk about this perverse person. Okay, this word perverse. Okay. Froward is lose, to depart or turn aside. Okay, to be wrong or crooked. I know that people would love to assign this to people who are sexually immoral or whatever, but it's not. It's more about somebody who is double-minded, and we've been talking about double-mindedness. See this here, but he blesses the home of the just. Surely he scorns the scornful. Surely he scorns the scornful, but gives grace to the humble. The wise shall inherit glory, but the shame shall be the legacy of fools. If you guys understood all of the relationship dynamic elements that are built into this, but let's get back to this thing about the earth and all that. By his knowledge, the depths were broken up. Okay. So here's that wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And there's a number of places in, let's talk about this for just a moment. Okay. There's a number of places in all of the Bible that talk about wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And I want you to grasp the idea that what you think you understand about wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, you don't. Okay. You have English words. I'm not, let me make something clear. I'm not talking down to you. I am talking to you as an equal who doesn't understand yet. Okay. So the way I want you to think about this is the intensification of all power in the universe stuffed into an understandable God, right? A God we can understand, a God we can perceive, an anthropomorphic image that we can construct all of our relational information to. A father, a brother, a son, a husband, right? It is very important. A bride, right? A daughter. That there's a number of places where Israel is called his daughter. And please understand, it is for your sakes that it is dummied back like this, but it is not for our sakes to be so ignorant that we just depend upon the anthropomorphic nuances of a being so powerful. Okay. And let's just keep it on the anthropomorphic level. Let's keep it on the Malchut level. Let's keep it on the world level, the earth level, the globe level. It says he breathes stars out of his mouth. But here's the thing, that's all still just this realm. And there's much higher energies than that, much higher vibrations, much higher frequencies. So please understand, you got to be careful with this. You can't just go, oh, I understand, and think that that word understand is what it actually says in Hebrew. It doesn't. Like I said, I'm not talking down to you. I'm talking to my equal. And the reason I say this is because what you need to understand and what you got to grasp, you've got to take hold of this. You've got to see it. You need to hear what I'm saying. Your God chose Hebrew to communicate everything about himself. Now, there's no dishonor to the Anglo-Saxon culture and bloodlines and all of that stuff. But guys, you got to let go of the English to really grasp the level of connection with your God. Now, when I talk about biases, I want you to understand your brain is pre-programmed to do certain things because that's what Christianity has taught you. And you either pulled that through your Anglican brain or you pulled that through your Catholic brain. And what I mean by that is once Christianity was Protestantized, it went two directions. It went the German direction of the Holy Roman Empire, as it were, and it went the Anglo direction. And when it went the Anglo direction, the king became the leader of the church. When it went the German direction, the synods became the leaders of the church, or the presbytery, right? The elders. And clergy or leadership became kind of the order of the day, as it were. There are some exceptions to that, but for all intents and purposes, this is a very liturgical, monastic influenced side, and a very royalty peasant feudal system side. Okay. And I want you to understand that when that happened, Christianity was influenced into these two biases. They were influenced into how much we cannot trust ourselves to be spiritual. But more came from that. And the way I want you to understand it is that you are not supposed to think for yourself. You are not supposed to trust your own spiritual intuition. In fact, that is in some circles witchcraft. To open yourself up to the influences of the higher energies. I said at the beginning of this thing, I began this journey like in 2000. And don't get me wrong, beforehand, I was not able to get God to shut up. I mean, I would be sitting in the pew and God would say, you know, that pastor committed adultery. And I would be like, why would I think something like that? Why would I have that type of an opinion? I came and visited this church. So one time, sat down in the pew, started listening to a sermon, and all of a sudden I know this dude's history. And I could tell you, I used to hate it. I was like, man, I wish I wouldn't think those things about people. And 2 weeks later, I'd find out that this person's stepping down because they were sleeping with their secretary. And finally, I just decided that it was useless information, but it was, I just always got the background information. I always got the story that it should have never came out, right? Beforehand. Sometimes I have gone to prophets and warned them and said, hey, look, if you do not stop treating your spouse this way, God is going to take away your ministry and your power. And I can't even describe where that man is at today. And if he's watching, I'll say this. I never, ever wanted any of that to happen. It was a warning given to me by the Father. And it was a warning that I was to give to you. That's the best I could do. I can't do any more than that. The rest was up to you and your choices. But having said that, what I'm trying to say is that before I had my moment, I still was the light. I still contained sparks. It's just none of them had taken hold, and none of them had become something. And in 2000, the year 2000, there was just a point in time where I was done with life, done with everything. There was an element of anguish and frustration and feeling like I was being held back by the history of my life that had already began, etc. And I went to an altar, as a good Christian does, and as we have been trained by the Lutheran and the Anglican influence, the Anabaptists, the charismatic Pentecostals, and all the in-betweens, the hundreds of denominations that have taught us all pretty much the same thing, that you are subjected and you are less than God and you cannot do anything good. And I took my knee and I said, okay, this I know. I want to serve God. I knew that in my head. And I didn't have this conversation with myself. I'm having it with you now. I want to serve God. I do. I want to. But I don't feel like I have enough self-control or humility to have it be authentic or real. Listen, short version is I'm smart enough to run circles around most people when it comes to business, when it comes to scripture, when it comes to, I had already had those abilities. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and I can have you for lunch just because of what they taught me how to study. But I needed it to be real. I needed it to feel like it was not some facade. Second thing is I needed authenticated proof that I had the right God in front of me. Well, I can tell you that began an 11-year journey that ended in an extreme level of humility and humbling and breaking and an ego destruction, an ego crucifixion, and many other things. 11 years of stubbornness, right? And when it was all said and done, I can tell you that the experience that I had, the relationship experience that I had, was still anthropomorphic. And I can tell you that I had I had all of the pieces of the puzzle that are expected in Christian circles, and there was still something missing. And that's when I was introduced to Torah. Then in Torah, there was still something missing. And I finally found it. And once I found it, everything just exploded into madness. And I can tell you that if I understood then what I understand now, I don't know if I would have took this journey. If you would have told me, here's what you're going to go through, and here's what you're about to learn, and here's what's going to hurt, I may have said, I'll pass. But I'm here now. And the reason I bring this up is because I want you to understand I had my sinner's prayer moment. It went something like this. I need you to be real in my life. I need my service to you to be real. And if I get back on my knees again, it's going to be with a shotgun in my mouth. That was my sinner's prayer. Now, what you need to know is that that was authentic as it could possibly get from me. It wasn't about, oh, you know what? I'm a sinner. I need Jesus in my heart. None of that. I said, oh, right. I don't know who you are, but I can tell you I'm addressing the upper management here. I don't want to, I'm cutting through all the middlemen. I'm talking to whatever it is you are at the highest level that you can possibly be in my mind. You need to be real. Because if you're not, we're done here. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because in terms of bias, I was taught how to be a Christian. I was not taught how to think for myself, study for myself, and find out for myself. And when it finally came time for me to step up and become the warrior that I am today, God got reset. And when I say God got reset, is I made him bigger. I made him the biggest possible thing in the universe. In fact, I made him the biggest possible thing in any existence of any realm and dimension. And I can tell you with my crazy brain, I can get off in all kinds of stuff about dimensions. I can get into all kinds of probabilities and quantum mechanic light things and everything else. And so getting him bigger than that was an effort. But I got him there because I can tell you, I don't want to serve the underdog. Maybe I should take that back because I really love underdogs. I don't want to serve something smaller than the biggest thing. I had to come to another conclusion. am I okay with the Christian Bible 66 book compendium God? And I could tell you again, I had to find myself outside of the teachings, outside of what listen, let me tell you this, and this is going to really stress you out. You are nothing but a puppet and a parrot until you reject everything that you've ever learned and start over. And if I'm the everything you've ever learned, I propose that you do find your place in the world of independence. And I don't mean that you just leave and stop listening or anything like that, because I believe my ministry has a purpose, and I'm sure you're here for a purpose. But I can tell you, don't just take my word for it. You go investigate it yourself. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to tweak the things that you thought you understood. Okay? All right. So remember, I put this wisdom, understanding, etc. on the board. Okay? Now, there are a number of places that say that the fear of God is knowledge and understanding and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted you to see that creation itself is an activation of these things. Now, there's a number of ways we can discuss the triune. So let's go into that for just a minute. Okay, so first of all, when we're dealing with wisdom, knowledge, understanding, we need to tweak how this stuff works, okay? So let's start with understanding. The Hebrew word is binah, okay? Binah. Wisdom, the Hebrew word is not chokmah, hok. Put some guttural sound into an H. Hoch ma. Okay? And knowledge is da at. Okay? All right. So a couple of things that we need to kind of get our minds around. The first one is where these words originate from. So Bina, for example, is the drawing of a house and the drawing of a seed sprout and the drawing of a person beholding something and being shocked and awed by what they see. Okay? So we have house continues in the beholder. That's Bina. Now I'm going to put up on the board in a minute, but I want you to think. What I wanted you to do is draw the pictures yourself in your brain. That's why I said house and not tent. That's why I said seed sprout and not what would be the image of a sperm. That's why I said a beholder instead of showing you a person with their arms up. Oh, I did put my arms up though. Cheated. Anyways, what I'm trying to do is get you to imagine this. So house continues in the observer. That's understanding. Now here's the intrigue behind it, is we have these interrogatories, right? Let's talk about these interrogatories. I'm going to make them green. Interrogatories. For English, we have who, we have what, we have why, we have how, and we have where, and we have when. Okay? Those are the English interrogatories, English language interrogatories. But in Hebrew, I want you to think about this a little bit different because you need to understand that there are verbs only in Hebrew, and modifications of verbs is actually what makes things have tense, but that tense can also result in a description. Let me give you an example so I don't confuse you. Here is an example. I will put it up on the board in a moment. In English, we have the word heal and we have the word healer, right? But we don't use healer. We don't go to the hospital and see a healer, do we? No, in fact, if we go see a healer, most of the times Christianity is going to be like, did you ask them if they know Christ? Or better yet, they're going to say, oh, no, that's witchcraft, right? Okay. But truth be told, is a doctor is a healer. Now, some of you might think that doctors aren't healers. In fact, some of you have some biases about medicine and about the practice of it that you probably need to get over. But I can tell you that in that process, there is also a necessary caution. But I propose to you that a majority of our biases are probably BS. Okay. Now, having said that, in English, we say doctor, and we say we need healing or we need treatment, right? So let's say we say treatment, or a diagnosis, or a nurse, right? Or medicine. Now, in English, we have medicine, doctor, nurse, treatment, healing, healer, right? Okay, that's not how it works in Hebrew. Let me show you. Okay, in Hebrew, the first thing that you need to know is that everything is a verb. So let's start with the Hebrew word rapha. Rapha. Okay. Now, let's see here. Okay, so you want to think about Rafa in terms of like where do you hear where do you hear Rafa, right? You hear Rafa in the song Jehovah Jireh, or when people talk about like all the different Jehovahs, like Jehovah Nishi, Jehovah Rapha, Jehovah Tzidkenu, those or Yahweh, right, are all special names given by people to Yahweh that basically designate what he has done, right? And in general, like what's one? Yahweh Roeh. Yeah, Yahweh Roeh. Yahweh Roeh is the God who sees, right? Yahweh Roeh was named by Hagar when they're in the wilderness, right? And so there's that element there. Now, the God my healer verse is actually going to be in Jeremiah. I was actually looking for it while I was talking here, and I don't seem to be finding it because it's Lord, my healer, isn't it? Yes, that's right, Lord. Lord, my healer. I won't lie to you. The technical difficulties, man, they took a lot out of me. So if there's pauses and things like that, I apologize. But I promise you what is coming is going to be exactly what you were looking for. You know what? I'm not gonna the search function is not working on the Blue Letter Bible at the moment, so let's try it this way real quick. Just want to get that. I just want to get that verse so I can show you what I'm talking about. Can't seem to find it. It's for some reason the Blue Letter Bible. Here we go with some more technical problems. For some reason, the Blue Letter Bible is not working correctly. Let me see if maybe I can find it this way. Okay, I found it. I apologize for that delay. Okay, we'll have to go cut that out for sure. For those of you who are still here, yeah, oh, I want you to see this. This is going to be basically Yahweh speaking to. Let me give you some context here. So this is Exodus 15, right? And it is the song of the sea. Okay, and so let's go back up to the top here real quick. So this is then Moses and children of Israel sang this song to Yahweh and spoke, saying, I will sing to Yahweh, for he is triumph glorious. So remember, this is after the Red Sea, right? At any rate, down here in verse 26, it says, if you diligently heed his voice, heed the voice of Yahweh, your Elohim, and do what is right in his sight, give ear to his commandments and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have brought on the Egyptians, for I am Yahweh who heals you. Okay. And so then when we go into the Hebrew here, right, this is Yahweh Rofeh, Rofecha, Yahweh Rofecha, right? And when we go to the root, the Rapha, it's to heal or make healthful, right? Now, we won't get into the fact that that's a drawing of a human head, a mouth, and an ox, which is really a strong voice of man that heals, but that's another story altogether. Let's stick with the context of why I'm showing you Rapha. Now, let me go back to the board here. Now, this is Ro Fe. Okay, Ro Fe. Ro Fe. Just like that. Ro Fe. So this is pronounced Ra Fa. Okay. And this is pronounced Ro. Oops. Ro Fe. Okay. So Rafa and Rofet. Now, what is the difference? Well, this is the verb to heal. Okay. And it's in what we call its lexical form. Let's do a different color for that part. Okay. Okay. So this is in its lexical form. And when we figure out, when we read Hebrew, what we have to do is break the letters, the words back down to that original thing. So what is this form here? This is called the participle form. And here's the crazy part about the participle form. It is the present tense. This is the ing. In fact, I'm just going to put here, actually, you know, not parentheses, we'll put it in quotes. ing of Hebrew. Okay? Rofeh. So this would be what? If this is to heal, this would be, let's put this in a different color. This would be healing. But now here's the crazy part. Contained within healing is the healer, the medicine, and we'll put in there nurse, doctor, and finally, diagnosis. Why is it so important? Because a doctor is a verb, not a person. Okay? And so when we're working with Hebrew, we need to understand that variations of verbs into nouns contains the elements of the action of the verb. Okay? So when you see a Hebrew noun, it is not like in English where it's a person, place, or thing. It is a present tense action. Okay? So a doctor is not a healer. A doctor is a healing. Okay? Okay. That's why I had to do that. I apologize for the delay. We've got plenty of delays going on already today. We don't need any more. But I wanted to show you that. I wanted you to get your mind wrapped around how Hebrew is different, because these interrogatives, we'll put that here, these interrogatives are verbs. Okay? That should blow your mind. This is a verb, this is a verb, this is a verb, this is a verb, that's a verb, and that's a verb. Meaning what? They're very different from English. And so when we are looking at the word bina, okay, we are looking at, and we'll go ahead and we'll jump into the Bible here. And I promise this one won't be so hard to look up because we already actually had it. Let me cue it up real quick while I'm doing this. Okay. So basically what we are looking at here is the idea that understanding, wisdom, and knowledge created things. Okay? All right. So let's go in and let's go to our first word, which is going to be Bina. Okay? Going down to understanding. To discern or understand. Bet Yod Nun. Okay, so before we go jump into the actual lexicon, let's talk about the pictographs. Let's kind of help. Let's do our knowledge upon the top of the lexicon. In other words, let's say, okay, pictograph wise, we have a house, Pictograph wise, we have a sprout. Pictograph wise, we have a beholder. And how do those work? Because when we get into the lexicon, it's going to be more, there's going to have less nuance and there's going to be more concrete kind of, this is how to interpret this, right? And we know that when someone draws a pictograph, that they are representing a entire story of action, right? Okay. So when we're looking at that, let's go ahead and we'll jump over to Bina real quick. And I'm just going to go ahead and put a bait. In fact, let me switch over to the bait, yod, and noon. And of course, that is the drawing of a house. Oops. Drawing of a house. A hand, right? And actually, let's do this in a different form. So we have the drawing of a house plan, right? Don't expect me to explain that. Let's just go with it. That's what the ancients believed was the tent, okay? And then we have a sprout. Now, it's interesting because in Hebrew, this is a verb made out of pictographs that has a parent root. And when I'm talking about a parent root, I want you to understand a parent root is basically the foundation of the word that's actually a letter pair. So it's hard to explain, but the best way I could put it to you is it was easier to just draw two pictures together than to draw three. But when we started to actually get into books and writing words like with Moses, we stopped doing the letter pairs and we started doing the three radicals as the lexical form. Now, there's a couple things you need to know. In a lot of ways, this is what we call a weak verb because it modifies. But the ancient pictographic Hebrew simply says house continues. And for those of you who already have a little bit of this knowledge, you know this is actually the word son. Okay? This is actually the word son. I'm sorry, I did not depict this correctly. Whoops. Come on, eraser, work right, please. Thank you. Here we go. We'll get it right this time. Right here. Okay. That's the root. That's the parent. I got distracted by the but that's okay. All right. So now what we have is house continues through what? Through work, right? That see, do a different color here real quick. Just to get some accent into this. That yod right there is actually the meaning for do or work, and has something to do with the world of action and asiya, but we won't get into that. But the yod is very powerful in that it is the effort, it is the energy, if you will, of the action. So really, in a lot of ways, what this says is the energy of continuing the house, right? And since it's in between, you need to know that it is an intervention of some sort. Okay? In fact, let's go ahead and label that as an intervention. In other words, the Hebrews put that in between those two to indicate that that was kind of the focus of the word. Okay? So here's being, like, you know, the magical fruit in pronunciation, but being in the sense of there being a effort to continue the house. Okay, so now we need to ask ourselves, how does that become understanding? And that's where we need to go into the lexicon and just kind of take a look at what the lexicon is indicating for us, because let me tell you, I did not go out into the anthropology world and make the effort like our friend Jeff Benner did. And so we'll go ahead and honor Jeff, and we'll just let him do his thing here in his book. All right, digital version of that lexicon. By the way, I just copied the Strong's Concordance number, and now I am going and searching for that word in that digital lexicon. Use that a lot, actually. Okay, and now what we got? We got 995 is our number, so we're good there. All right, so here it is. To grasp the meaning, to have comprehension. Okay, but look at this. This is powerful. Being the tent was usually divided into two parts, one for the females and the other for the male. The wall makes a distinction between the two sides, understanding them as the ability to discern between two or more things. Huh. Okay, so now we kind of get into some, what's the word I'm thinking of? Now we get into some kindergarten stuff, right? So what is this? This is sink and float, right? Soft and hard, hot and cold, right? That is understanding. It is making a distinction between two things, but also finding the similarities. Okay, that is a red cotton ball, and it is not hot, but it is actually soft. And that is a red hot piece of metal, and that is hot, and it is hard, right? So they're both red, but they're definitely not the same tactile experience. Okay, and so the way that we think as human beings, we have a tendency to always do compare and contrast. This is this, this is not this, right? What was my favorite thing when I was a kid? The Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the other. And identifying why and how, and those learning things are built into everything that we experience and do. So understanding is interesting, but here's the crazy part. This word understand, or being, let's go to that real quick here, is actually about the word between, in the sense of that wall separating the two genders. But then we have this tavun, which is intelligence. But I want to go back to the parent root real quick, because I think that is going to really kind of tweak your brain a little bit. Okay, so, oops, I went too far. There it is. Okay, and that should be highlighted. We should have probably studied that by now. I'm surprised that that is actually not highlighted. Okay, anything that you see highlighted in these is past teachings that I just highlight them when it happens, okay? To let us know that we've looked at it before. Okay, so parent root, bang. The action is to build or plan. The concrete is tent, panel, sun, stone, thumb, building, or what. But I'm going to tell you right now, the concrete is sun, okay? These other ones are the stems, right? But if you go into the paperback lexicon, or I mean the hardback lexicon that's actually printed on paper, I know that that's probably hard for some of y'all to grasp that there's actually still books, but there are. And in that lexicon, it will tell you build, sun, and the abstract is understanding. So what does building as an action have to do with understanding? Well, in principle, the pictograph bait is a picture of a tent. The noon is a picture of a sprouting seed that represents continuity as the seed continues the next generation. Combine these the letters mean the continuing in the house. The tent was constructed of woven goat hair. Over time, sun bleaches and weakens the goat hair, necessitating their continual replacement. Each year, the women make a new panel approximately 3 feet wide and the length of the tent, the old panel, is removed, being recycled into a wall or floor, and the new strip is added to the tent. Since the tent is only replaced one small piece at a time, the tent essentially lasts forever. Mind blown. The illustration of eternity just got laid in front of you. The illustration of recycling just got laid in front of you. The illustration of cycles just got laid in front of you. And that is the power behind this house continues, is a cyclical relationship with the cosmos, with the existence of all things. So Bina, interestingly enough, as a function of the trivium, is going to be two of our interrogatives. All right, so let me go ahead and link Bina to our interrogatives, and then we'll go from there. All right, so when we talk about what, okay, we talk about Bina. When we talk about why, we talk about Bina. So we can find out the causal relationship. And let me explain this. The causal relationship would be what caused this thing to occur or exist, right? So that's the why. And so we don't want to think about causal relationship in terms of reasoning. Like don't think in terms of what was the reason why, but what caused the thing to exist or occur. Okay, so it's not about philosophy here, it's about cause and effect and its relationship. Okay, so now when we talk about the what is really powerful, right? Because knowing the what correctly plays a huge role in our biases. And what I mean by that is if you don't know the what correctly, for example, I'm just going to give you a simple one, okay? If I say chalev, see, it's deshen lechalev, I'm sorry, deshen uchalev leshono. In Hebrew, that is going to be, well, deshen is not that word. Okay. It's not deshen, but the Hebrew is milk and honey under the tongue, right? Milk and honey under the tongue. What would an American person who had never heard anything about Hebrew before think it means when you have milk and honey under your tongue? Well, the intrigue here is that most people would say that means sweetness, right? Milk and honey is kind of a sweet and rich flavor. So if someone has rich speech or a rich tongue, or maybe it's the taste, right? So perhaps maybe what we're talking about is something being pleasant, right? But never would it have crossed a person's mind unless they really, really understood the mechanism of Hebrew, would they say, oh, you know what, that actually has to do with the idea of it being under the tongue and not above the tongue, meaning there is something dark about it. Understanding under in Hebrew would give you that understanding. And so when we're dealing with tachat, the word tachat, which is under, if it would have been above the tongue, it would have meant something different, but because it's under, it's actually deception. Milk and honey under the tongue is being sweet talked. Milk and honey under the tongue is manipulation, right? And so the reason I bring that up is because the what is not present in the cultural understanding. And so we need to kind of like really get our minds wrapped around the possibility that our English is actually causing us bias. What is a land flowing with milk and honey? You don't know. You do not know what that actually means. You don't. You think you do because you've been told that it represents promise or that it's this thing or it's some other thing. But if you really understood milk and honey in its context, you would understand what it represented. Okay. So the reason I bring it up is because when we're talking about the what and the why, we're not asking the process. We're not asking the how. We're definitely not asking the when and where. The space-time thing is not going to exist in this process until we get to knowledge. But the premise is that the space-time thing still has its role. It's just, it is a very human experience. Okay, so we've dealt with Bina. Let's look at Chokhmah real quick. I know we really need to get to this because really, truly, this is just the beginning of what we really need to get into here. And I don't want to keep you guys late. I know that we already started late, etc., etc. Okay, so getting back into the Blue Letter Bible and specifically that verse, we will be examining Chokhmah as its power to create. Okay, by wisdom Yahweh founded the earth, right? By wisdom, which is Chokhmah, right here, the Chokhmah. Okay, here we go. So, and this is coming from the root word chacham, right? To be wise. All right, so let's go and let's take a look in the ancient. Okay. So a skilled one, right? Characterized by deep understanding of a craft. Well, there's that English word understanding. So we just went full circle, right? Well, no, not if you stay with the Hebrew. Bina does not mean chokhmah, right? So don't get caught up in the English word understanding, all right? A person characterized by a deep understanding of a craft. Well, that's interesting. Let's see where this goes, okay? You're gonna love this actually, by the way. All right, here we go. So this is something we've studied before. You should know this. This is the word cham, right? Cham. The word wisdom actually comes from the word cham. Okay, so here we go. The pictograph chet is a picture of a wall, meaning to separate. The mem is a picture of water. Combine these means separate water. Cheese was made by placing milk in a bag made out of animal skin. The bag was hung out in the sun and pushed back and forth. The skin of the bag contained an enzyme that, when heated and shaken, caused milk to sour and separate into two parts: fat, curds or cheese, and water, whey. The whey could be drunk and the curds could be eaten, stored for consumption. So what is it? The heat, right? So chokhmah or chacham has something to do with heat. Intense, disordered, or often destructive rage, which is our word chama, and chamat, which is the skin or bag for holding the cheese or making the cheese, right? Chum, in the sense of having a relatively high temperature, right? Eager or passionate. Chum, in the sense is darkened from the heat of fire, okay? And then we have chaman, which is a sun idol, has something to do with heat, right? The heat from the sun warms the contents of the bag, right? That's chamam. To be warm, to project extreme heat, to be heated either internally or externally from the sun or fire. And then the source of heat, the curds produced from the skin bottle. This cheese has a buttery texture and flavor, right? A food consisting of coagulated, compressed, and unused ripened curd of milk, separated from the whey. And then humama is cheese. Hum is a rampart, as in a fortified enclosure, which is kind of built up and compacted, which is kind of where they're getting the idea of cheese being built up and compacted. And then yacham, the sun or the heat of the sun, warms the contents of the bag, but then natural body warmth as time of natural body warmth as well as the time of menstruous when animals mate, conception from the animal's mating or through the heat of passion. And so chacham, the wise thoughts and actions of a person as separated out of thoughts. So what we're talking about here is basically in terms of critical thinking would be kind of, if we have the compare and contrast, what we have also is we have a sequential ordering, right? And then a separation out of each thing identifiable in its own way or its uniqueness, right? Which means what? Wisdom is kind of about diversity. Wisdom is about what is making something to be unique from the next thing, right? And also, also in the sense of Isaiah 7:15, which we'll go to here real quick. Isaiah 7:15, I think, is a good example of the use of this. Curds and honey he shall eat, that he may know to refuse evil and choose good. So what do we got going on here? Well, first of all, that word there, chama'a, right? Chama'a is actually butter, right? And honey, butter and honey. And somehow it teaches him how to refuse the evil and the good. I'm sorry, to choose between refuse evil and choose good. Why? What is there? Well, it's in the actual pictographs, right? The idea of separating the curds out from the whey through heat or pressure. So one of the things you need to know about Chokhmah is it's all about pressure and heat or passion. The reason why Chokhmah is considered to be the skill of a craftsman is it's actually the passion of a craftsman. Let me explain. You can teach a person how to do a craft. Let's pick a craft. Let's say welding, okay? You could teach a person how to weld. You could teach them how to lay the bead. You could teach them how to adjust the length of feed. You could give them all the knowledge of materials and strength of materials. In fact, most welders that I can think of have had to pass some sort of structural test to know exactly how strength of materials work. But you cannot teach them how to be passionate about their work that causes them to have the beautiful skill to create and sculpt and move things into creations that are beautiful to the eye, desirable. For example, any type of metal art that contains those things. I mean, the amount of skill that goes into that has nothing to do with teaching them how to weld. It has to do with teaching them how to be unique and how to be passionate. And so Chokhmah is a passion. Chokhmah is that extreme desire to bestow all of the benevolence upon an other, right? Chokhmah was that offspring slash continuance of the original desire to bestow that Yahweh, or I should say the intensification of all power in the universe, had to want to give to another. Bina was the first receiver of that, and then in the process of Bina, or in the process of understanding, wisdom was gained. Why? Because of our interrogatives. Let's look back. Here it is. The next part, or the next important part, is actually a palindrome, which is basically going to be, let's see, let's do different color. Let's do yellow. Yeah, yellow's going to be for that. Okay. So the next part here is actually going to be the who and the how. That is going to be attributed to wisdom. Now, what is important about this? Okay. Two things. Number one is that there is an implication of an expert here. Somebody who knows more than you about the how would be the who. Okay. So we say, who shall bring it down to us? Right? Who will create this thing for us? Who will give us water, right? How will that occur? Right? Why would it occur? No, that's not part of wisdom. Wisdom is the who and the how. Okay. Now, the next function here is going to be very human oriented. And I will depict that in red. And obviously, we need to now look at the last two interrogatories in the English language. And those are where and when. And I'm just going to put here human. Because why? Because in the realm of the intensification of all power in the universe, there is no where or when. It, as an entity of energy that is intensifying, has a consciousness and has a desire to bestow on something other than itself, is and will always be timeless and spaceless. Because not only is it everywhere, but it's nowhere. And that's important for you to understand. That what we as humans need, we need a location. So we point up. We need a location. So we say out from us, right? Exousia, which is authority, ek being outside of you, projecting out from you, right? Okay. And so the premise is then what we have is this idea of out or away from or up, but up isn't really up. When you look into the cosmos, the Earth is tweaked this way, the galaxy is tweaked this way, and the rotation around the sun is tweaked this way, so we're really not up. But the premise is that for us, there's an up because of what we perceive to be gravity, and there's an up because we look up and see something. We've defined up as that direction. Not so for the intensification of all power in the universe, meaning what? Knowledge is hidden in the experience of time and space. In other words, you would not know a thing unless you had some sort of information of space and time. I know that sounds off the wall, but the premise is that basically what you're working with is a finite mind trying to define infinite things. In fact, the word infinity itself depicts a number, and that number happens to be a number so big that we represent it by um, a lazy 8. And we also have a tendency to represent it negatively as a lazy 8, as in something infinitely small. Something so small that's not necessarily 0, but as close to 0 as you possibly could get. Whether that be in temperature, whether that be in mass, whether that be in, magnitude. So please understand, when we're working with this, we need to grasp something here. And that is that these two upper parts are actually very unattainable to us through our common way of thinking. We don't understand the pressure behind Chokhmah. We don't understand the passion or the heat behind Chokhmah. We do not understand why Bina is such an important and relevant element, and why in Proverbs it says get it. And not only does it say to get it, but it says to spend whatever you need to spend to get it. And the same is true for wisdom. In fact, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of understanding, right? And knowledge of the holy is wisdom. Just saying. Okay. So what we need to accept is that there is some sort of separator or some sort of veil between wisdom and understanding and knowledge. Knowledge requires all of the interrogatories: who, what, when, why, how, and of course, where. Okay. Now, the reason I gave you all this is so that you have a better grasp, that you have a better vision and a better hearing of what I am saying when it comes to wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Because when we talk about eternal life, we talk about some sort of context or concept. Okay, let me present it to you this way. We have eternal life in the sense of that there's some sort of soul condition that is existence beyond this life. Okay? We have eternal life in the sense of an immortal, somebody who just does not die. Okay? And then we have eternal life as a figurative idiom in Hebrew understanding that is lost in English. Okay? So we have what we call the Olam Haba, which is the world to come. Okay? And Yeshua mentions it a few times. He says they will have their part in the world to come, that type of verbiage. Rabbis have a tendency to use Olam Haba to indicate the reward of the righteous, right? But if I say Olam Vayed, Vayed is as long as it is witnessed, okay? Vayed is literally and the witness. So the world and the witness is translated in English as everlasting life. Behold, man has become like us, knowing good and evil. Therefore, let us block the way to the tree of life, lest he reach out his hand and take and eat and have eternal life. Sorry, that's that game show sound right there. Meaning what? You just lost all that money that you thought you were going to get because you didn't guess the right price. Point being is you're stuck on what you have been taught because you don't realize what you really are. And so as a result, what you have is you have somebody saying, oh, we're going to live forever. Now, if you're a Jehovah's Witness, like what I was raised, you can live forever on earth in paradise. Okay. I respect that a lot more than I respect this idea of going to heaven that's never mentioned in the Bible. But what I can say is that even then we are getting distorted into the idea that we were not already eternal beings. You didn't just all of a sudden pop into a body and now all of a sudden you exist. Okay? Because listen to what it says. It says, and God formed out of the dust of the ground, right? Adam breathed into his nostrils the neshama, and then he becomes a living soul. Meaning what? The neshama, breath of God, pretty eternal, right? Okay. So we can accept that the eternal aspect of what and who we are as a nefesh chaim, or a living soul, is actually something eternal. And I am not going to touch upon what dust of the ground actually is, because I can tell you it ain't the dirt you've been digging in when you go out and play in the garden. But what I can tell you is that the word dust is an actually terrifying word. And I don't mess with it. And I honestly, I haven't studied it in over 15 years. So maybe it's a little bit more than what we think it is. Well, there's a reason why I'm bringing this up. And that is because when we are working with our biases, we have a tendency to experience things a certain way and conclude that that is some sort of significant thing. Now, I've taught you in the cycles teaching that you are Elohim. Yes. In fact, we addressed Elohim before we ever got into the cycles teaching, but I explained to you that the cycles are actually made for your sake. The sun, moon, stars, constellations, zodiac, Shabbat, feast days, and all the other cyclical processes, including but not limited to any Fibonacci sequences that exist within nature itself, and its frequencies, and its tones, and its rhythms, all are on your behalf, and they are music. And I taught you also that humans have a tendency to lean in the direction of ceremony, create priests, create temples, and experience the divine in their process of wanting to quote unquote worship, because they don't necessarily understand their identity and don't understand what the Hebrew word for worship is. Okay? We've also learned and accepted that we as humans, in our egos and in our own eyes, are separated from that divine process. So the neshama that was breathed into Adam is stigmatized and is stifled. Meaning what? We had to elevate that within us in order to have it be us, not in order to activate it. We are divine. By default, we're divine because guess what? Adam couldn't breathe his own breath into himself, which means we're not gods unto ourselves. We are that original intensification of all power in the universe, dumbing down through transformation, right? We talked about transformers and the way voltage travels across the gap, and when it does, depending on how much coil you had on each side, there was a less voltage all the way down to the voltages that are a tablet. Could you imagine plugging a tablet into a high tension, high power line? 750,000 volts running through a tablet. I actually would like to see that on camera. Okay, so the premise is that basically where we get our information is through our emotional connection to our cognition. Okay, very different from this. Okay, emotional connection to our cognition. So now, I have taught you that you cannot give anything to the intensification of all power in the universe. And I have taught you that if you think that you could give something to God and add to him or take away from him, go outside and try to say a curse at the sun or do some sort of thing to try to diminish the magnitude of radiation that's hitting this earth right now by you adding or taking away from the sun, because he breathed that out of his mouth. So that would adjust your attitude a little bit. But what I really want you to get your mind around is that it's supposed to be a reception, and that reception is supposed to be intercourse-like behavior. And when I say that, I want you to think in terms of energies and not in terms of bodies, because I know immediately if I say intercourse, all of a sudden we got body parts getting together, right? But what I want you to get your mind wrapped around is, A, for those of you who have experienced it, because there may be some who have not yet, what happens in that climactic moment of that coming together is the actual interaction of the intensification of all power in the universe, dumbing down into something we can handle, and us coming together. Okay? Now, there's two elements to that. The first element is that you need to understand that the divine and humans don't mix unless something has occurred. So let's get this. Christianity at large has a tendency to identify Yeshua as some specific and very special and identifiably unique divine being. The problem is that's not what he taught. That's not what he expected from his disciples. And that's not what he tried to show through his parables. Kingdom of heaven is like unto. Kingdom of heaven is like unto. Kingdom of heaven. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. And all these things. What things? The things that you take thought for, the things that you worry about will be added to you. So what? You seek the kingdom of heaven first? Okay, great. Where's the kingdom of heaven? Oh, it's not over there. It's not over there. It's not over there. It's within you. People. Is it not written that you are all gods? When did he say that? He said that when the Jews picked up stones to stone him, because why? Because he made himself equal to God. The problem is that you think that's the only one in the Bible who thought that way, acted that way, or believed that. And we see Yahweh tell Moshe, I am going to make you a god after Pharaoh. And Aaron is going to be your prophet. So Aaron can walk into a room and say, thus says Moses, tomorrow I will make it rain. And Moses, as a sovereign God, can make it rain. Do you get that? Now, the reason why this is so important is because of what I'm about to show you. Okay? What I'm about to show you is the problem that we have right now. So the first thing that I want you to think about is, what exactly does Christianity teach? So let's draw that real quick. Okay? This is what Christianity teaches. This is what we can expect from our God. And this is what we are to him and what he is to us, right? This is how we process this. Now, let me show you what Yeshua communicated. Let me help you understand how this works, okay? if a man who was going on a date, okay, or maybe we should just use courtship. If a man is courting a woman, what does he do? Well, one of the things that he does is he already has programmed into him, because men are treated from a very young age how to treat a woman, right? And so he goes and he opens the door for her as she walks through. He helps her up into the carriage, right? We're going period here for a minute. He walks arm in arm with her, but he has his sword side available, right? And so the premise is that that he is able to what? He is able to defend her, right? That's the premise. And so actually she would be arm in arm on this side. It depends on whether he's left-handed or right-handed. But the premise is that he always keeps his sword to the outside of her in order to defend her. Now, we could get into all kinds of diverse opinions about these actions. We could see the side that says if he assumes that she needs the door opened for her, that she herself does not have the strength to open the door, and that's what he's trying to indicate there. We can assume that if he's the one who has to have the sword, then that means she's not able to defend herself on her own, right? And there can be an offense created that says, no, I'm strong enough to defend myself, right? There could be an offense there. And I know that there are probably some ultra-Christian conservative circles who claim, wait a minute, the Bible says there's a gender inequality, and so we're supposed to treat them that way. But you have yet to understand the level of equality you are supposed to have in order for a relationship to occur. Let me give an example. Let's say we're doing speed dating. So a man sits down in front of a woman, and here's how it's going to go. You will never be as strong as me. You will never be as smart as me, because I will make all the decisions, including the money. And you will definitely never, ever, ever be allowed to do anything other than what I expect you to do. Right? Okay, so before we get into the vomit on the table from the female, let's get into the inequality of expectation present there. Where does it come from? What is the concept? Well, of course, we have husbands, dwell with your wives with what? With understanding. Oh, there's an interesting word for Paul to use. With understanding, as if she's the weaker vessel. Who was the first weaker vessel? Understanding. The first vessel to receive, that was designed by the intensification of all power in the universe, was a female, was understanding, and created a cause and effect of a negation particle. A self-denial that actually comes into existence as a denial of self. It's like when you have a piece of cake in front of you, and you know that if you eat that piece of cake, you are going to have to get up in the morning and go jogging or go get on the weight pile, right? You're going to lift some dumbbells or something. You know that you're going to have to discipline yourself to get up in the morning, right? So you eat the cake. Next thing you know, here comes the alarm. You hit the snooze. Here comes the alarm again. You hit the snooze. Here comes the alarm again. Okay, I'm getting up. So you get up, right? Now, what do you have to do? You have to deny yourself that wants to sleep and exercise. Because why? Because you just laid all these carbs upon yourself. And truth be told, you should probably exercise after you eat the cake, but that's a whole nother story. Point being is you get up, you do the exercise, That's self-discipline, right? Well, that's that moment of saying, no, I'm actually going to get out of bed. I'm actually going to do what I'm supposed to do. And therefore, I am denying my self-desire to sleep. Well, Yahweh, the intensification of all power in the universe, says what? I will deny myself the desire to bestow upon everything in every direction without any governance, without any supervision, without an HOA, etc. I'm going to expand out into this universe in all directions. But in order for me to actually give to something else, I have to deny myself. I deny myself. And so the first thing she does is follows the instruction and says no. She is the self-denial. Well, understanding. Dwell with your wives with understanding. So perhaps we need to make some adjustments in how we're thinking. Well, let's think about this for a minute. If you have a relationship with somebody, it is defined in one of three ways. You are either the authority, the subordinate, or the co-equal. Now, let me show you this in a different illustration. So let's say that we have a line here, a line here, and a line here. And let's say that within those lines, we have increments. So let's say this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now, what is going to happen is these are increments of time, and over time, we are going to have something occur. So let's see how I want to do this. I want to go, let's say that this is going to be 1, this is going to be +1, this is going to be 0, and this is going to be -1. So that's in terms of magnitude, I guess we could say. All right, so here we go. We're going to go down to number 1, but we're going to do it gently and in a very flowing manner. How did I just change this? Okay, it is very gently and in a flowing manner. We're going to come down to number 1. We're going to go below number 1, and we're going to go under number 2, and we're going to come up to number 3, and we're going to come right back up to the top at number 4. Okay, so the deal is that there's a number of things that have happened. Number 1, this section here, let's do it in this color. This section here would be kind of our common ground. Okay, this section up here is going to be our uncommon ground. And this section here is actually going to be even lower in its commonness. So let's say that for all intents and purposes, human beings are operating somewhere in the area of 0, okay? And then what we want to do is say that there is a whole bunch of transverse energy being produced up here. Okay. Now below is actually kind of a different kind of situation in that there are things that basically we have authority over and we have to elevate, etc. So what I'm going to say is just not elevated. Okay. And I'm going to say that humans basically kind of have a bandwidth of about here to here. And when I say bandwidth, what I mean is that a human actually drops down and goes back up somewhere between what would be less than zero or a little bit more than zero, but not much more than that. So what we have to conclude is that if there's some sort of energy that is increasing, I don't want to use the fat paint for that. And I don't want to use that color. So number one is increasing. Okay. Or intensifying, is conscious, and has desire, and this is not necessarily the end goal, but this is definitely the resultant. One could argue that the only way in which any of these things could be relevant to a human being is through some sort of communication, but also some sort of transference of that information, and also a reduction. So we will call this a reduction. Okay. But then in that process, we also need to accept that the only way in which we could have an existence of relational interaction, which has to occur because of this. See, that number 3 is what screws everything up, because that number 3 makes it necessary to reduce. When I say screws everything up, what I mean is that it doesn't have the same magnitude as it had before, right? The desire to bestow, the consciousness, and the increasing power are reduced, right, by the necessity to dummy it down for us. But what I want you to get your mind wrapped around is the only way in which there could be a relational interaction between two entities is if they have some semblance of equality. All right. So let's talk about some semblance of equality. What color do I want to make God? I guess I want to make God this color, orange. Okay. Wrong pen. Okay. So we're just going to put God right here. This is us. Okay. Now, let me tell you what Christianity teaches you. Christianity teaches you that the intensification of all power in the universe stuffed himself into a human being and came down and was our equal, right? Our equal, and therefore we were able to have an interactive relationship. However, that's actually not correct. What it says is that he did not consider it something to be grasped, or in some translations, robbery, to be equal with God. Now, let me tell you where we have a problem. We have a problem in the Trinity doctrine that he is co-equal with God, yet subordinate to God. Okay? So in our Trinity problem, we have kind of a paradox or a contradiction. And I can tell you, there's actually been some deep doctorate papers written on subordinationism and the co-equalism. So the reason why this is important is because what we think happened is that Yeshua came down in order to give us an equal standing with God. However, that's not what he taught, and that's not what he showed us, and that's not what he indicated. What he indicated is that we were actually something more. Greater than these things will you do, because I go to the Father. Wait a minute. Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, hold on. Greater things than these will you do. Let's go down the list. The blind healed, the sick healed, the lame made whole, lepers made clean, people raised from the dead, the weather, the agriculture, the cosmos itself is indicative of some sort of relationship connection to Yeshua in which it is subordinate, and he says we will do the same or greater. Now, it's interesting because what we have perceived is that this is Yeshua, right? He came down to tell us that, oh, I see what it is. It's like, that doesn't look right. To tell us that, or to give us an equal standing with God, right? In other words, that we would be connected like this. But that's not actually what he did. What he did is going to require me to erase a little bit here, but what he did was he came down and he told a people who were taught and believed that they were less than zero to come up to where he was at. Think about it. Could they control the weather? No. Did they have the wisdom? No. What did they believe about Torah? What did they believe about the oral law? What did they believe about all the things? Right? Okay, now watch this. The truth is that this bandwidth that I'm talking about right here was part of the problem. We would fluctuate between highs and lows, highs and lows, highs and lows. But what Yeshua was trying to help us understand is that we actually were a unique version of the intensification of all power in the universe. But more than that, that we needed to come up to his level because that level just so happened to actually be our naturally created state. Meaning what? Meaning Yeshua didn't come down from above in the sense that there was something where he was up here. Okay? He wasn't up there in that sense. Why? Because what you've got to grasp is the only way in which there could be a relationship connection where you were willing to receive into yourself that which was to be bestowed, which was all of his benevolence. You had to already be equal with him. So, let me explain to you why this is important. We hear all the time in Christianity how we are supposed to have a relationship with God. Okay? And that's somewhat true and somewhat not true. And what I mean by that is we are definitely supposed to have a relationship. Is it one in which we give? Yes, to an extent, because we give him pleasure by receiving pleasure from him. In other words, his desire to bestow is satisfied when we receive, right? Okay, now watch this. In that process, that cannot be something way out in the universe that's unattainable and that is ineffable and is not an understanding of, but instead has to be actually here with us on earth already as himself. I don't know how else to explain this except that you are not going to receive from a greater if that greater is unattainable. And you are not going to receive from a greater if you perceive that that greater is always going to be greater. And so, as a result of that, what Yeshua did is he brought us back up to where we were supposed to be since the garden. And the way that he did that is that the intensification of all power in the universe as a mechanism of process definitely had an intervening action occurring when it came to Yeshua. Yeshua was the communication of Torah, a force of benefit, a benevolence upon the people. However, that was not received that way because the people could not, and would not accept that something doesn't come for free. Now, where this becomes important is because in all of the existence of your walk and your process with Christianity, you have been taught to have this relationship, and you will go into the church and you'll wave your hands and you'll sing songs and you'll feel really good, but you will be nowhere and in any form in relationship with the intensification of all power in the universe. I'm going to tell you right now, one of the things I had to get honest with, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I had to get honest with it, was that emotional music makes me feel like I am, quote unquote, close to God. However, Yeshua's definition of who we are, Yeshua's definition of what we do, and Yeshua's definition of all the existence that is behind all of the quote unquote Father was contained within him, to the extent that he tells Philip, all this time I've been with you, but you did not know me. Oh, the Trinitarians love that. See, the Father's in Yeshua and the Holy Spirit's in Yeshua. They're all one. And what about you? Is the Father in you? Is the Father in you? Because if the Father's in you and the Father are one, then how are you different from Yeshua? See the problem there? You see how Christianity has painted it that God with us, the Emmanuel, has been some sort of concept of him coming down and then being equal with us for that time period. You see, the problem there is that what he did is he came down, pulled us back up and said, here, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And when I say supposed to, I want you to understand that it is more along the lines of what you actually were created in terms of purpose, as opposed to some sovereign will of God that if you go against, you're in some sort of trouble. I have in my congregation a few individuals who, every time they think they're going against the will of God, think they're going to be punished, and therefore begin to punish themselves and do him the favor. And unfortunately, God will come to me and be like, can you fix this? Because I didn't do that. Right? And then I have to go tell him, hey, look, you're not in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong. Right? But why do we do that? Because we were programmed to think that we were evil. We were programmed to think that we have this original sin, etc., etc. Yeshua never communicated none of that. Yeshua never once said that you were just straight up wicked and that you were hopeless, that you were totally depraved. What a load of hogwash. And in order for Yeshua to be tempted, he had to be totally depraved too. You're not ready for that one. Okay, so why is this so important? Because when I, back in 2000, had my moment, I was in the thick of Christianity. And so I believed that my service to him had something to do with this. But the truth is that my service to him has something to do with this. And what's really important to know is that this is actually each one, and the way that I'm going to illustrate this may make a few of you angry, but each one is somehow a uniqueness of him. That didn't work. In other words, the purple dude, right? The purple dude is not the pink dude in any way, but both are the intensification of all power in the universe. So when we talk about relationship with God, what we need to realize is that what we've been taught is that there's an upward relationship and there's an outward relationship, right? The cross. Remember that teaching in your Sunday school where we have an upward relationship with God and we have a horizontal relationship with man? Sorry, lost that Price is Right thing too. Okay, so the premise is that is actually how this works. Your connectivity with each other is actually your relationship with God. And love is not a noun. It is an action that contains the person, the substance, right? For example, when we're talking about action in terms of verbs with Hebrew, we've got what? The doctor, the nurse, the diagnosis, the medicine, the treatment, right? All of that contained within the verb of love. Love is the person. Love is the action that the person does. Love is the substance of that action, right? And so when we are doing this whole love thing, what you need to realize when it says love your neighbor as yourself, and interestingly enough, has to do with vindication, it has to do with vengeance, it has to do with making somebody pay. Love your neighbor as yourself is the idea of, do you really want to happen to you what it is that the vengeances need to be satisfied upon you to happen to that person? Because if you're okay with it happening to you, then you're okay with it happening to them. That's kind of what love your neighbor as yourself means. Now, there's more obviously to that because there needs to be a substance within you that you try to create within others. So there's two very important points that come across from this. Number one, it's your bias of preference on how you feel, quote unquote, close to God is actually just a manipulation of your mind and is an emotional attachment to pleasant thoughts. Nobody wants to be connected to an angry, reactive, and explosive God. But he's all those things. And you need to understand that anger is very different from human anger. That anger is a mechanism to work with us in our behavior. So issue number one is you have some great worship music, you have some really good emotional moments, you might even cry. None of that is actually a relationship with God. That is your mind connecting yourself to what you need to be your reality in order for there to be a relationship with God, but that's not it. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. But it brings no pleasure to God. None. Okay? Number two, as an Elohim, you need to realize that the only way in which you can actually receive in a way in which would be acceptable to you and not cause you guilt, not make you feel inferior, etc., etc. See, that's one thing about it. Male figures do not understand how female figures feel about life and what females believe male figures think about them. And male figures, unfortunately, feed that fire on a regular basis. But truth be told, is male figures do not understand women. And male figures do not understand equality. So, when I am talking about equality, I'm talking about that moment in which there is everything has been stripped away. There is nothing else but the two of you interacting through an intimate process that is energy based, that does not have necessarily gender and does not necessarily have role. Okay, so no roles, no genders, just energies connecting, and that energies that are connecting are actually the relationship. So when we bring forward this idea of raising our arms and opening and all that stuff that we do, we're just being goofy Elohim that have forgotten, because we've been doing what's right in our own eyes for so long, that there's a disconnect. And the only people who actually have the connect are these neurodivergent seers and, prophets and priests and things like that have these extra little feelers out there that are actually able to connect with the divine correctly. But please understand, you will not accept the light without there being an equality. If the light is coming down to you and you can't give back somehow, you will not accept it. Also, you do not like giving the light away for free. And so in your mind, because you had to earn the light through tzedakah, then somehow there is supposed to be some sort of reciprocation for your action. Yahweh, in his kindness, built all of that into the system. So Torah, as an action of benevolence, is going to have the reciprocal benefit of abundance. The reciprocal benefit of abundance is to be spent upon those less fortunate. That reciprocal benefit of abundance is going to become a greater reciprocal of abundance as a result of the charity, but the charity itself is the way that you earn the light. Why? Because you wouldn't accept it for free. But what you don't realize is all of that is as a result of the fact that the horizontal connection or relationship action that is supposed to be occurring within you in connection with God is with your fellow man. But now I'm going to take it a step further. It is the golden calf season. And I want you to understand the frustration you've been feeling. If you feel like you've been swimming through marshmallow goo, you're not wrong. I want to remind you of something. Okay? Actually, you know what? Let me draw this stuff on. Let me do it in the classic manner. And the reason why is because you guys' minds have already seen this, and therefore it will skip your conscious mind, and I can put it in your subconscious mind. Yeah, that's fine. We can use that. We can use that color. You guys know the drill here. You guys know that I'm about to draw a red line, right? And that red line represents the physical. And you guys know that I am about to draw a blue line, and that represents the spiritual. And you guys know that I am going to start here with Pesach. You guys know I'm going to go to Shavuot. And you guys know that I'm going to go over here to Tabernacles, right? Nope. Okay. Well, actually, you know what? Okay. I think I'm actually going to do it this way. Let's not put the golden calf. But what I do want to do is I don't want to label that. That's what it is I don't actually want to label this over here. The reason I don't is because I want you to pay attention to the trend, not to the feast day, because you get caught up on how long it is and you get discouraged. Okay. So let's mark it out here. Let's do it that way. And now I will label this golden calf. So what's happening during the golden calf season? Well, let's look back to the wilderness season. Wilderness season is culminated in that moment of God brought us out here to die, right? That moment. So let's depict that. Okay. Now, this trend can seem deceptive. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. You're at your lowest of your low. You have experienced pain, loss, anguish, lack, and decrease. And now all of a sudden, out of the middle of nowhere, things start getting better, right? But what happens with that? There is a feeling like it's too good to be true. The wilderness season can give you such a smack in the face, physically, in this realm, financially, mentally, emotional, right? It brings out your vices, it brings out your addictions, it brings out your this is the wilderness season is the time of relapse. The wilderness season is the time of making that same mistake that you make every year over and over and over and over for your entire lifetime. That is that season. However, and this is important, is that doesn't last forever. However, it can feel that way. It can feel kind of grueling. And so when you pass through Shavuot, you can actually feel like this spot right here isn't all that great. Especially for those of you who elevated through the counting of the Omer. If you elevated through the counting of the Omer, what is happening right now? Right? Downward trend. And so what's happening? Your spiritual experiences during the wilderness season have declined, and now they're below zero, which means what? Which means you're lucky if you get one. You're lucky if you have that moment. Okay? But what's intriguing about it all is that those spiritual experiences came as a result of, let's put this here. Those spiritual experiences came as a result of this break here. What I wouldn't give for these pens to stay on their spots. Okay. And so those spiritual experiences were about elevation, right? See, I need one more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I need 2 more. 7. There we go. Okay. So each of these little ones here were special little ebbs and flows. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and mark them differently so that you can kind of grasp what was happening during the Omer. So during the Omer, we have yoink, yoink, yoink. Well, actually, it looks more like this. It goes expansion, then it goes contraction, and then it goes balance. And then it goes expansion, and then it goes contraction, and then it goes balance. And then there is a continued balance into the last one. And so those ebbs and flows then are basically the way in which we are elevating. So when we are expansive, we're operating within our strength, which I'll just go ahead and label these really quick in such a way as to kind of make an understanding to them. So this would be within your strength. And this is going to be within your weakness. And this is about balance, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with strength or weaknesses. Usually it has to do with reciprocation concerning the other. But regardless, you went through 2 cycles of that, right? So you went through this cycle and this cycle of that. So that was a cycle within itself. By the way, these are all harmonies of the same music. But what you don't realize is that there is something else occurring here in the golden calf season. Again, you felt like you were swimming through marshmallow. You feel like there's just this effort that you have to make in order to do anything right. And not only that, but there's just this lack of presence. Because why? Because he's gone to prepare a place. Right? All this time we had with Yeshua until his ascension after his resurrection. Remember, the resurrection begins the counting of the Omer. Okay? So all this time that we had with Yeshua during this process of elevation, now all of a sudden he leaves. All right? The bride as an entity of energy, not as an individual, but as a corporate collective consciousness of energy, falls asleep. And in that process of sleeping, she forgets her God and builds the golden calf. But what's important to know is what the golden calf actually is that ungratefulness. All of a sudden, it is undesirable to be with friends, to be with family, to be with your spouse. You don't like your car anymore. You don't like your lawnmower anymore. You don't like your barbecue anymore. You don't like your dog anymore. You don't like your church anymore. You don't like your teacher anymore. Because why? Because all of those things are the necessity of gratefulness. And when I say gratefulness, you understand, I'm not talking about saying thank you. Remember, Hebrew is an action language. We don't say thank you in Hebrew. We say thanking, and all of the entities contained within it. And the reason we do is because when we say it, interesting, watch this now. If I say Toda Rabbah, Toda Rabbah, do you know what that actually has contained within it? An intensification of gratefulness. So now, how does that equate to an action? Because Hebrew is an action language. How do you demonstrate gratefulness? Is you consume the thing that you have received with pleasure. You enjoy it. You see, one of the reasons why you may have not received the light during the wilderness season, the light of Passover, which consequently is diminishing because of this right here, because we're jaded. But one of the things that you need to realize is that this is all light of Passover. Light of Passover created by the Messiah. Rabbis teach that the light of Passover is the light of the Messiah. What Messiah? Well, for us who have accepted it, Yeshua. Now, the reason why this is important is because if there was ever a time when you really needed to tap into your relationship with God, it's now. But you need to understand God the way Yeshua taught him. And not only that, but you need to understand his instruction the way Yeshua taught it. And you need to understand your position the way Yeshua taught it. Because what you are not is some scrub who's evil and can never do good. But I can tell you, you are also not that act of benevolence that he is. And what I mean by that is that you have to receive it first before you can give it. But also, you need to consume it. You know, the other day I got a message on Slack, and it was about an abundance of food that had been given to one of my congregation members. And they said, "Hey, Rabbi, you know how you teach that 10 hamburger illustration? Well, that just happened to us. We can't eat all the food we have right now." And I'm like, okay, great. That's the whole equal distribution thing. But check this out. You know what we will do? We'll take that entire lot of food and go give it away, thereby not showing our gratefulness for it. See, you think the gratefulness is in the equal distribution, and that is true. However, I taught you something else. You fill your belly first. Because if you don't, you will become resentful, and resentment leads to hate, and hate leads to murder. And you will kill your God, which is consequently, right here, we say, oh, God kills, right? But what do we say during the golden calf season? We eliminate from our reality the dependence because we're resentful, because we're anguished. The wilderness season caused us to be bitter. That's why it's called mariba. Mar is actually bitterness, and mariba is the testing of bitterness. And mariba, consequently, is when God became angry with that generation for 40 years. and consequently made the mechanism by which they would not enter the promised land. I swore in my wrath, they would not enter my rest. Right? And so when we are in the golden calf season, it is time to work on your relationship with God, because guess what? That specific piece is actually the part we need to consume him. We need to consume the manna without complaining. We need to drink the water without complaining. We need to enjoy the water, the manna, right? So the concept is that we had this time in the wilderness that kind of jaded us or made us bitter. Well, guess what? That bitterness is what caused the golden calf. Bring us to this mountain, and now Moses leaves and he's gone for 40 days and 40 nights. You know, that's more than a month. And what a privilege it was here. What a privilege it was to be with Yeshua and to connect with the Messiah who knew no sin and became sin for us and made us equal with God. But now we're here, and there is no elevation anymore. In fact, the world's in trouble now. This right here is the where the waters rise so high, there is no more humanity in the flood. Okay? And in all of that, we have this context of not making another god for ourselves. That's foolishness. That's like the people that say, "Oh, your phone is an idol." They get on my nerves. But instead, not consuming what you've been given. You see, part of the reason for this is because where it was free here to those who would accept it, this requires work. Oh, where did we see that symbol before? Well, let me just add the rest. Bina requires work. Oh, but there's more. It requires passion. It requires chokhmah, right? It requires it to be drawn up, just like Yeshua did for us. You see, this dips because now it's time to earn it, or it's time to receive it and consume it. Demonstrate that you want it. That's the concept here. So I have in my house young people, and those young people have a tendency to be very, very, very not interested in eating the food that we want to provide. And I can tell you, the way that it is communicated is, I don't really want that. I'm not hungry. I don't feel good. To avoid consuming the thing that's being provided. And so one of the things that happens during the golden calf season is we're so anguished by the loss of that light that we become jerks. We become reactive. We say, "Oh man, this stuff that I've been given is horrible stuff." Why? Because we've been up in the clouds flying around with our angel wings. And now all of a sudden we got to come down here and deal with this muck and mire. This muck and mire is the manna. And this muck and mire is the water from the rock. And this muck and mire is the protections. And so I have a way of digging in that I will recommend to you, but I actually am not actually practicing it in this season because I've tried to implement something a little bit different. But for people who are just starting out, this is a good way to do it. Okay. So the Psalms are broken up into 150 Psalms. Those 150 Psalms can be broken up into sequences of 5 times 30. Okay. And so if you go through a 30-day cycle of reading the Psalms, 5 Psalms a day, then you actually have a ability to go through a month of the Psalms. Well, the Proverbs go through 30 Proverbs, right? And then for those months that have the 31, you add Psalm 119 as a repetition, right? Because Psalm 119 doesn't really work within that increment of those 5s because it's kind of like really long. Now, there's all kinds of Bible reading programs out there, but I'm going to explain to you what I do with this one. So the concept is 5 Psalms, 1 chapter of Proverbs. Well, what I do is I adjust all of the Psalms and all of the Proverbs to me. Okay. And so if it says, blessed is the man who does not walk, or the blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the ungodly, which is going to be Psalm 1, verse 1, it actually is going to be, I am blessed because I do not walk in the counsel of the ungodly. I personalize the psalm. Okay. Now, part of that actually can become really amazing, but I want you to understand that the connectivity there is going to be learning about the God that you're trying to connect with. But what you're going to find is that the Psalms are actually about people. Okay. Now, I want to say something. There is somebody who knows more than you. There is somebody who thinks differently than you. There is somebody who is more powerful than you. There is somebody who is stronger in mind than you, who you can seek for guidance. And that is the intensification of all power in the universe. But if you want to connect in relationship, you need to understand your mind will not allow you to receive something from way up there. In fact, his mind will not allow you through mercy to give something to you way down there. You need to connect with the Elohim and have a relationship with the Elohim that is here right now with you, equal to you, and that's us. Okay? So please understand, in all of the things that I've taught about you being Elohim, about you being Hasatan, about you being all of these things that Christianity doesn't really seem to communicate correctly, there is not a diminishing in the magnitude of love and connection that the intensification of all power in the universe has a desire to have and bestow upon you, but you need to realize the level of equality that needs to be present for that to occur. Now, when I am communicating this, I want you to understand the focus and the concept is the relationship with God, but not how you've understood it before. You see, we want to believe these things about Yeshua and believe these things about the Holy Spirit and believe these things about God when the truth is that there is not anything in Yeshua's teachings to indicate that he didn't want anything other than for you to be equal with him because you were below him. But the truth is he is just Torah. which is the instruction from the intensification of all power in the universe on how we are supposed to interact with each other. And so what did Yeshua come and do? He loved, but you don't understand love. You're still trying to do that Greek weirdness, that agape stuff. You need to grasp that love is a verb, and you are the actioner of that verb, and you are the substance of that verb. So, what does that result in? That results in a necessity for you to let go of the subordination. You men who are married, you do not go into your house and just start being a tyrant. It would never work. Not only would you lose her love and she'd divorce you, but you also know that there are certain things like, for example, happy wife, happy life. Well, there's something to that, right? But the premise is there's some sort of subordination there where you get under her, right? So why is it so hard for us to grasp that he made us equal with him? And then Yeshua came along and took away our guilt from it. I'm sorry, but you are equal with God. And you need to get your mind wrapped around that in order to have a relationship with him. Because this subordinate stuff, it's man-made. Yeshua didn't teach it that way. When he says things like, for example, I go to the Father and I don't know when I'll be back, right? Those are all idiomatic processes of the wedding steps. You really think for a moment that the intensification of all power in the universe stuffed into a human would not know the date in which they were coming back? You need to understand the context of what you're studying and what you're experiencing. Yeshua says, out of the abundance of the heart, words come, as come all sorts of evils and murders and adulteries. Out of the abundance of the heart. What do those offenses, how do those offenses affect the intensification of all power in the universe? They don't. They affect your fellow man. And guess what? That just so happens to be the equality that I'm talking about. I know that this can be frustrating. And I know that there is probably some of you that are like, man, ignorance is bliss. I want to go back to Sunday morning worship and pretend like I actually have a relationship with God. And I get that. But the truth be told is all of that stuff is just emotional fluff and is not the reality of the energies. I feel most alive when I have connected with a human and poured into them, and perhaps they have reciprocated upon me in some way as to either show gratefulness or whatever, but they consume what I have given them. And that's because I'm an Elohim and I am like God. And therefore I do God things. And the God thing I just did with that person is more important than any of the other things that happen in my life. No matter how good I am at something, the one time when I feel most alive is when I am elevating someone. And I can tell you that's because I am the intensification of all power in the universe at that moment, elevating them into a position of equality. Don't get me wrong, there's bandwidth. There's times when I do have to be the authority as a man. There's times where I have to be the subordinate as a man. There's times where I have to be the co-equal as a man. That requires humility, that requires wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. But not how you would think in English. And so, what is the crux of, or the criticalness of this season? Is to hunker down and get into connectivity with the divine, which means you have to see the divine in the other. You were trained here to do what you're about to do here. And truth be told, is all the little nuances of the 49 energies can all be drawn up here. But the only way is to squish this down, to get small here. You were taught how to get small here, right? For those of you who went through the Omer this last time, which consequently, if you were not actually part of the congregation and didn't receive the daily information that I was sending out, short version is that we were taught how to get small during that season. You were taught in the wilderness season how to be hungry. So in this season, you will make yourself hungry, which means what? This is going to require fasting, right? To create an elevation. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and he will raise you up, right? So the premise is bring this down, bring this up to equality. That is the power behind the golden calf season. Remember, the fruit was put in the garden so that Adam wouldn't eat it. You say, wait, God said don't eat. Exactly. It was put in the garden so that Adam had the opportunity to be obedient in order to reciprocate the process of earning the light. The light was already given, and God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Now you can earn it. By what? By being obedient to my instructions, which are what? Social justice. We don't know exactly what was going on with that fruit in that garden, but I can tell you, in some way, shape, or form, it has to do with humanity. And it has to do with your fellow human, which at that time happened to be Eve. And I can tell you, one of the things that Adam was neglecting at that time is that she wasn't pregnant yet. Because when it comes time for Yahweh to talk about what exactly is going to happen to the woman versus what's going to happen to the serpent versus what's going to happen to man, what happens to the woman has something amazing in it. As if that was the thing that was messing her up. Now, I don't want to get too much into that because that's a whole teaching on its own. But where I need to connect with you all on this is that you need to dig in and get into relationship, and you need to consume with joy the things that you have been given. The wilderness season has made you bitter and turned you into kind of a cynical jerk. And you need to realize that that's part of the sludge you're swimming through, is cynicism, that bitterness, that frustration. But it's a new season, and we've turned the scroll. It's time for something new. It's time for something different. It's time for you to do the work. What came for free here, which includes but not is limited to thirst, hunger, and a lack of protection, and an amazing flight through the clouds, now has become an effort. You have to make yourself hungry, and you have to raise up yourself into the clouds. I don't know how much more clear I need to be on that context. And what I mean by that is there a relationship with God? Yes. Is it what Christianity has taught? No. Is it contained within the mechanism of equality with Yeshua? Not quite how you would think. And what else? We are in a season in which it is not free. I think if I was to sum up the two seasons, I would say one is free and the other is earned. That's why it's longer. That's why it's harder. And it's why it is about creating within yourself the things that you were trained about here. Oh, the beauty of the moment in being hungry and receiving that satisfaction. That moment, I want you think about your favorite food and how you go and you get it and you eat it and it tastes wonderful. And there's this that moment of satiety. That's what the wilderness season was about. You can recreate it here by simulating those processes. Fasting and making yourself hungry is one way in which to elevate this stuff up. So, you need to become small, and then be big, and be balanced. You need to do all that on your own, because Moses split for the season. And that could potentially even come in the form of God growing silent. I can tell you, in my experiencing God, I have definitely happened upon that chapter in which he has been silent. And I have had those moments of not knowing what is the will of God anymore. And it's anguishing. But it isn't about that God dialed himself back. Listen, I want to remind you, this is all the wilderness. This is all the wilderness. Until the season of the promised land, this is all wilderness, which means God is going to be, there's still dryness, there's still things missing. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, who raised you up to a position of honor. Lower yourself down into this realm and connect with the people. I had an invitation the other day to have a speaking engagement, and I can tell you, because of this season, I didn't want to do it, and I can't tell you how valuable of it is. But this season made me kind of like, yeah, you know what I mean? So be aware that this is a season in which you do the work. This is a season in which you create the experience. We went through the first part of the wilderness season, right? Not the golden calf season, but the season of hunger, thirst, and lack of protection, in order to train for this season in which we will actually do the things. And so this is the summer maturity from the cycle of Israel. This is the spring resurrection. This is the summer maturity. And then we'll move into the fall feast, in which there's going to be an actual changing of the energies and a bunch of other things, but we're not there yet. So in conclusion, simply put, you need to pursue your relationship with God right now, but you need to understand it better in its context of how Yeshua taught it. Okay? Don't think because you have a really pretty song that actually makes you closer to God. It doesn't. Now, having an emotional attachment to God is a great thing, but it is not going to add to him in any way. And it doesn't impress him, and it doesn't make him feel good. It makes you feel good. It makes you pretend like it makes him feel good. But it doesn't. Because the only way to give him pleasure is to receive what he has given. And the only way to do that is to do it with gratefulness and joy and consume it. Yes, you get the 10 hamburgers, but you better eat the ones you can. Fill your belly first, then go distribute. Okay? Shabbat shalom.